In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Thanks, Lisa. Life, love, loss, and the resilience of the human spirit. Few stories capture these profound experiences as intimately as Carrying the Tiger by our special guest, Tony Stewart. In this deeply moving memoir, Tony takes us on an unflinching journey through his late wife Lynn's battle with cancer, their shared moments of grace and heartbreak, and his own path toward healing. Adapted from more than a decade of raw and honest reflections, Carrying the Tiger truly is a testament to the power of love in the face of loss, the search for meaning in grief, and the unexpected joy that can emerge from sorrow. Tony, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Terry. That was quite a nice intro. You read the book and said some beautiful things there, and I'm extremely happy to hear them.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor. We said before the show that both of you and I have been caregivers for cancer patients. So I feel like I'm talking to a brother. I'm just glad you're here.
Well, thank you very much.
What moved you to tell the story to others?
Well, if we go from the end back, the reason I eventually decided to make this a book and tell it to the world is to help other people. I wanted to share the experience that I had just lived through, to take people through it with me in a way where they would learn what it was like to have these experiences. On the one hand, they're common in the sense that most of us, if we live long enough, will live through either having serious illness or accompanying a loved one through serious illness, and will live through loss, as I did lose my wife, and then the grief that follows, which was unbelievable, and then the complexity and confusion of starting to find something new and good again in your life while you're still crying and grieving and maybe feeling guilty, as I did. So all of that happened. But I didn't intend to write a book about it. No, I never would have dreamed of it. I started because I was doing these posts on caringbridge.org, which is a nonprofit. And I highly recommend it to anyone out there who's dealing with a caregiving situation. They exist to create a kind of a private Facebook-like page, but you can restrict it to just your friends, where you can post updates about what's going on with you, or in my case, with my wife. And your friends can read them, and it's so much easier than... We started out with emails. I mean, Lynn was diagnosed, and we sent an email to our friends, and she had a lot of friends, and within about 3 days, there were so many emails going back and forth that we knew we could not sustain this. This was unbelievable. Here we were trying to find doctors and figure out what to do when we were in the early days of all of that, and we have to do all these emails too. So then someone told us about CaringBridge, and Lynn asked me to write the posts. She was okay talking to her friends, one-on-one, but she could not imagine herself sitting down and writing a post saying, we saw this doctor today, and this is what they're saying, and this is my diagnosis. So I wrote on CaringBridge for years, and ultimately did decide I want to make this into a book. And I went through 3 or 4 or 5 passes. It took me a year and a half. I started with copy and paste. I had 700 pages. By the time I decided to make this book, which was several years after Lynn had died, I had 700 pages of CaringBridge. That was both my posts and also comments, because people write comments. And some of the comments are really fascinating and helpful. And they are what gave us the strength to keep going a lot of the time. Anyway, my first pass, yes, I edited that thing and I made a beautiful book that I took to my copy shop across the street and put a spiral binding on. And I thought, wow, I've done it. I can give this to a few friends. And I looked at it and I thought, there's something special here. And I should also say, it wasn't just me. During the years of writing the CaringBridge, every now and then one of our friends would post a comment saying, oh, Tony, I'm so appreciate that you're writing this. You're helping me. Or this is fascinating. I can't believe what's happening to you. And then even when I thought I was going to stop because Lynn had died, first of all, I felt compelled to keep going because writing these posts had become part of my own personal therapy. I just couldn't stop writing them by that point. But then this was very confusing because it had been her story and suddenly she's died. And I'm writing about my grief and what it feels like day to day. And several friends said, please keep going. You're helping me deal with my grief. So with these kinds of encouragement, I started to think maybe there's something here. And I should say also some of the stuff I wrote, I felt like the sections about her in hospice day to day, I would write at 3 a.m. about what that day had been like. And I felt as if a muse had come to visit me. I've never written anything so special and beautiful in my life. And it was just pouring out of me. So I had all this material and I thought some of it was very special. And my friends had told me reading it had really helped them. And I made the first draft, which was all cut and paste. And I thought, this is great, but no one other than my friends is ever going to read this. You don't, like, who are these people? And why should I read all these letters? They read like letters. So I spent a year making multiple iterations, going through the thing, winnowing it down, finding the through line, remembering stuff. There was stuff that we had deliberately omitted because Lynn didn't want me to share too much about her pain or about the reality of the side effects and how messy they could be, all kinds of stuff. So I knew I had left those things out. And I spent a past just trying to remember the stuff I had known that I had left out. And then the process of writing the book caused me to remember more and more and more about what was going on at the same time. And I just kept enhancing the narrative by filling in the things that hadn't been on Caring Bridge while using the Caring Bridge posts as the through line. It takes you from beginning to end. It's all based on stuff that I wrote in real time, but it's much more than that. And it's in a way more personal because I was able to say, I mean, there are a couple of places in the book where I say, I'm actually more interested in what I left out of that Caring Bridge post than what I put in. And then I go and tell you a story about what was really happening to me, for example, at the same time.
Carrying the tiger, it's actually a dual journey. It's a journey about his late wife, Lynn's experience as a cancer patient and about his experience as a caregiver. Was any part of looking back over this too painful for you to endure in a moment, even several years later?
I don't think anything was too painful for me because I actually enjoyed. I'm not sure that's the right word, but in a therapeutic sense, I felt it was good for me to go back. And when I first started going back, Lynn had been gone for 3 years, I think, at that point, or 2.5 years. So it was already, I tried several times, much more soon after she died, and I couldn't do it. That was too painful. I needed a few more years to pass. And also it happens that during those years, things happen in my life that became part of the story that actually make the ending of the book much more interesting than if it was just, oh, she died and I was really sad and then eventually I stopped being sad. So that was like a gift from the universe to have a way to close out the story. But it was also because when I tried to write it after she died, it was much too painful. But then 2.5 years after she died, reliving these scenes, I cried buckets the first pass, and then half buckets the second pass, and then eventually not so much. And it became more a craft project. It became, how can I tell this story so it will be interesting to other people? And I made films 40 years ago as a professional filmmaker. I mean, I'm used to that process, and I just sort of went into that mode of now I'm a storyteller. It happens that I lived this story, but now how can I make it a great story?
You know, there's a graphic that I really love that I think totally articulates the grieving process, and that is, it's a picture of a canning jar with this big black ball in it that's grief. Uh-huh. And what most people think is that the canning jar is there and the grief ball gets smaller, but there's a line below it, which is, I think, what grief really is, and that is, the grief stays the same, but our jar gets bigger. We're able to put it in a different context. Was that your experience?
Yes, although actually the metaphor that I found myself using, and it's in the book, and it came to me 2 years after Lynn died, very similar concept, was putting down planks of flooring. That I felt like the 2 years that I had lived, during which I started to form another relationship, which was very confusing, but just living, crying and then crying less and being confused and then being less confused, all of that stuff that happens. But living without her, you slowly put down planks of flooring. And she's there, but those painful experiences are now covered by all of the living that you've done since then. And now that's what you're standing on. And those are the memories that come first now. I mean, right after she died, if I did anything of the sort that we used to do together, of course, it was unbelievably painful. And then eventually, I started doing them with other people. I started doing them with my girlfriend. And now I've got the memories that are doing things with my girlfriend that are sitting there in the year, on top of the other memories. They coexist. It's very important to say that. I just wrote a piece that I'm going to submit to Psychology Today, or some about this illusion. It may be true for some people. There's a phrase called "women grieve, men replace," and a grief counselor I know told me that when he was talking about my book to his grief group, the women, once they reached the part where I have another girlfriend, he replaced Lynn. He wasn't grieving. And my entire article that I hope, I'm going to submit it to Psychology Today, we'll see if it ends up there or in some other publication, is about how, no, for me, it didn't work that way at all. The challenge was learning how to have both. How to keep my love for Lynn, which I refuse to let go of, while simultaneously finding my way into a new relationship.
If it is possible for her to continue to look down upon you and your life, what do you think she's feeling right now about you?
I think she's simultaneously feeling very happy for me, very proud of me, and embarrassed that I'm making a big deal about her.
Which was one of the things that attracted you to her in the first place, right?
Yes. She was totally a self-effacing person, tons and tons of friends, painted all these superior paintings that do sell, but never believed she was a particularly good artist. And when she was dying, two different things from hospice, two different things she said to me in the last 2 weeks of her life when she knew she was dying. First, she did say to me, "I want you to have another girlfriend." After which she immediately shook her head and said, "No, I don't ever want you to have another girlfriend."
Really?
Yes. And then she said, "Yeah, I do want you to have a girlfriend." And then, no, I don't want you to have a girlfriend. And she ended with, "Yes, I want you to have another girlfriend." Now, this, of course, was a huge gift to me when I actually started to have another girlfriend, even though it was not a panacea. And all of those conflicting feelings did happen. But then a week or two later, literally one of the last things she ever said was when I told her, because she was hardly talking anymore, actually, but she could hear. I told her about how her gallery was arranging an impromptu online retrospective of her work because they knew she was dying and it was going to go online in a few days. And she said, "Don't make it a big deal. I don't want a hagiography. It's not a big deal."
What advice do you have for other caregivers?
I think we would need about 3 hours once you get me started. The most important thing of all is to get support. The first year of our journey. So the book is in 3 parts. And the first almost half of the book, which the subtitle of the book tells it all: living with cancer, dying with grace, finding joy while grieving. And that's the subtitle of Carrying the Tiger. The book itself is in 3 parts that absolutely correspond to those, although they don't have literally the same titles. So the whole first part of the book starts on the day we learned that there was something horrible in her spine that shouldn't be there, and then scrambled around trying to find doctors, and then all kinds of things happened. There were so many twists and turns. Part of what makes it an interesting story is that it's not just, we found an oncologist and she started taking drugs and she lived for 6 years. No, the cancer had attacked her spine which was how we even knew she had lung cancer. She had non-smokers' lung cancer, and it kills millions of people because in many cases like hers, there were no symptoms until it had metastasized. And we found out about it because of back pain and some other gastric issues. But so that was the gift that kept on giving, because they had to radiate her back, which weakened her back. The tumors had weakened her back. Spinal vertebrae started to collapse 6 months later. She had multiple procedures. That first year was a nightmare. And I was living it with her. And she had a therapist. And she joined a support group partway into the year. And I did not. And I kept saying to myself, you can do this. I had a full-time job. I had luckily a job where I could work at home a lot and I had flexible hours I was just really lucky in that regard. But I kept saying, you can do this, until I started having physical accidents from distraction and my body just saying you can't. And then I had a mini breakdown, which is all in the book, as a result of which I finally, after a year of this, in my case, I went and found a therapist for myself. And that was huge. But did I slow down? I'm not sure I did. And it was exhausting. We never had kids, but I say in the book that I felt as exhausted as a young couple with their kids. I don't know whether that's literally true, but that's the best analogy I could give. You know, it's like 4 hours of sleep and this happening and that happening. I mean, yes, at the worst 4 hours when she's in the hospital, when there are physical things breaking down. It wasn't like that every night, or I don't know if I would have survived it at my age. I was a little old to be having kids. I was in my late 50s at the time that this started. But so my biggest advice is recognize that you can't do this alone, that this is hugely draining on you as the caregiver, and you need to pull back and acknowledge that. I would also add, in my case, recognize, and I think this is true for a lot of people, that you're going to have complicated emotions that you may not feel comfortable sharing with anyone because they reflect badly on you or you think they would. And I cite two in the book, very particular. They were very real for me. I missed having sex the way we used to be able to. And maybe it would be better if she died sooner rather than later. She had incurable cancer, which at first we thought was only, at most, she would live at 2 years. We were really lucky because she got into a clinical trial of a new immunotherapy drug, and she got 4 more years of life that most people don't get because it doesn't work for everyone. If it were that good a miracle drug, we would have read about it everywhere. It works for some people, and it didn't work forever. But a year or two in, it was so hard. I was having these thoughts, and I could not tell Lynn. And I'm like, want to burst. I mean, this is so hard on me. And she was saying, Tony, I'm afraid my cancer and all the work you're doing is going to push you away from me. I rely on you so much. And I'm having these thoughts and I can't say them to her. Eventually I did. When I had that breakdown, I finally was like sobbing and admitted these things to her. And she pulled me to her. She said it made perfect sense. She caressed me and comforted me. I mean, it was amazing.
What did your therapist say to you about those feelings?
He said they're normal. He said they represent that everyone who's going through these kinds of stresses will have their version of these sorts of feelings. You can't be under this kind of pressure without having feelings of how you wish the pressure were over, and you can't have your life taken away from you as this kind of debilitating. I mean, it affected her back, it affected her body in many, many ways. So a large part of our physical life was taken away from us, not just sex. And we did continue to have, I will say, sex, but not the way we used to. Let's put it that way. But in so many other ways, because it was impacting how, her walking and all kinds of things. And these are things that are being taken away from you, and you don't know how long it's going to last and when you're going to get them back or if you're going to get them back. So in both of us, we're both having all these feelings, and it's very hard to let them out because you feel ashamed.
Well, and you write about finding joy in the midst of sorrow. What's an example of that moment of joy that surprised you?
That particular part of the subtitle specifically refers to how just a few months after Lynn died, I started connecting in the most unusual way with an acquaintance, a woman that I hadn't seen since we were children. It's kind of a long story. I could tell it here, but it's in the book. We ended up discovering that we were each grieving. In her case, it was primarily grief because her husband of 33 years had just told her he was leaving her. And in my case, it was about Lynn. And for various twists and turns, we started talking, started with emails. She lived 1,200 miles away. I just want to say this to the people who think, oh, you just went after this babe that you met. No. She lived 1,200 miles away. I barely knew. I'd seen like a photo of her on Facebook. And we started talking about grief and we connected. And eventually that became my new relationship. But that was starting way too soon by anyone's measure. I mean, I hadn't had the memorial yet.
It happens when it happens. There's nothing.
It happens when it happens. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that I discovered that grief and joy can coexist.
That's a huge takeaway for me, Tony.
Yeah.
You don't have to feel guilty about that.
Yes.
That's the takeaway for me from your book. What do you think? What do you want the readers to take away from reading Carrying the Tiger?
Oh, a number of things. I think the most important thing is that I want them to understand that beauty, grace, joy are always available to us, even when we're going through these kinds of, I want to say horrible experiences. I don't want to overstate it because almost every human being, if they're lucky enough to live a long life, goes through some version of these experiences, probably more than once, depending on whether we're talking about your beloved partner of 35 years. That can only happen to me once, but life and loss, they happen. And even in the midst of that, we found, and I actually want to go back. You asked me about joy. I mean, there were moments with Lynn way before, during the ups and downs of her treatment, when we'd have a good day. We'd have a good day and suddenly appreciate the world in a way we never had before. And I do want to say, it's almost a cliche, and it is 100% true. When you have faced mortality, in this case, my wife's mortality, not mine, when you have faced mortality, you start seeing beauty in the world and in the fact of being alive that you didn't appreciate before. And it isn't like every day. It isn't like I've suddenly turned into the Dalai Lama or the Buddha or someone walking around living that way every minute. But it's with me in ways that it wasn't before. And Lynn and I started experiencing that because she had several good years. We had some very, very hard times, and then a good 6 months, and then some very, very hard times, and then a good couple of years. And we went to parties, and she danced. And, it's just like we had life. She couldn't do everything she used to do. She refused to be more than an hour away from her doctors because we knew that this could turn on a dime. But we really lived it and loved it and enjoyed those times in a way that I can't say we ever had before.
That is a common theme that I find when I talk to other people who have walked the path that you and I have walked, is that once the diagnosis happens and that day is when you start the clock as a cancer survivor, everything about the way you look at the world changes. The colors are brighter, the highs are higher, the lows are lower, but you are forced by that diagnosis to actually, I think, live the life that you're supposed to live. Isn't that odd? Is that true? I mean, is that how you felt?
I do 100%. I mean, there's a section in Carrying the Tiger where I'm talking about it's during the pandemic. Lynn's cancer started to beat the drugs for what will turn out to be the last time, although we did not know it yet because it took about a year to play out, right at the time of the pandemic. And there we were. I'm in New York City, and New York City was hit very hard, very early. And there are sirens screaming through the streets. There are morgue trucks parked outside all the hospitals, including my local hospital just 3 blocks from here. And every afternoon, we would take a walk together on Riverside Drive is the name of it. It's a beautiful boulevard right outside. I live right next to it. And just walk up and down Riverside Drive. And it was through March and into April. And the buds showed on the trees. And then the leaves started coming out. And then the blossoms started coming on the blossoming trees. And we saw this every day in a way that I never had before. And we talked to each other about how magical this was. We had lived in this apartment next to Riverside Drive for 25 or 30 years without ever having that experience. And here in the midst of the pandemic, we were having it. And I think it's very much because of Lynn's cancer, because of what we had been through, and because we knew that at any minute this could be it.
What is one thing that you're doing right now that keeps Lynn's memory alive in your heart?
I have surrounded myself with paintings by Lynn. I mean, the listeners can't, you can see me, and you can actually see that right over my shoulder is one of Lynn's paintings. This house is full of Lynn's paintings, and it is full of photos of Lynn, because at some point I realized, as I was starting to become more and more involved with Cordelia, that's the name of my girlfriend, I realized that it was really important to me to hold on, to make space for Cordy in my heart. And this is a large part of the last quarter of the book, is how the heck this happened and how do you do this? And despite Lynn having said, I want you to have a girlfriend, that totally did not make it easy. Easier maybe than for other people. But at some point I realized that if I could have Lynn all around me in an external way, it allowed me to make space for her. And I have Lynn all around me. I see her every day. Even though Cordy lives here, about some percentage of the time. She's still from Minneapolis and not always here. The other thing I will say is that on Lynn's birthday, we have friends over who knew her, and we celebrate her birthday. And on the anniversary of the day that she died, we light candles. Cordy and I, we don't have friends over. We light candles, and we take these photos, and we put them around the dining room table, and we honor her over dinner.
Carrying the Tiger is the name of the book. It's available wherever cool books are sold. Written by our special guest, Tony Stewart. A powerful conversation, Tony. We could continue for the next 3 or 4 hours. I hope I get to meet you in person sometime so we can. Thank you for being on the show.
You're very welcome. This was really fun.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.